Good evening. Good evening. So this is Oscar speaking here. I'd like to thank you for being on the other side, spending the next hour here with me. We end with Melanie. Melanie is going to be our moderator. She's going to be texting on the other side. So feel free to make your questions. She's going to share the questions with me. I'm not seeing the chat. But I will be here to go through 6 different bottles of port, talk a little bit about the family, and have some fun. Let's do it, Melanie. So, first of all, maybe before you get into the ports which are under this table, I will give you just a brief introduction about the location where we are. We are at my parents' cellar in São João da Pesqueira, and this is about one 1.5 kilometers, maybe a mile away from the winery. My 3-year-old daughter is here with me upstairs, so I'm sure that at some point she's gonna show up and say, I hopefully hi and leave. Maybe she won't say that much. So I have this daughter, I have two other kids. I have also a sister, Claudia, who's the person that responsible for the winemaking of our ports. She would be the right person to be right here in front of the camera to talk to you about our ports, but she doesn't like that. She actually is on holidays this week, and that's why I'm here. We are a small family business of port white growers and producers. We have 121 hectares of vines, and of those, we have about 20 under organic production, white and red. Right now, we only have one organic port on the market, but soon we will have more. And what we do basically is to collect these grapes that we grow in this area of vines, bring them to our winery. We only have one winery. Age the ports there at the winery and ship them to England, to Portugal, to 32 countries around the world. Um, Most of our production is port. There is also about 1/3 which is wine, regular still wine, white, rosé, red. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. Well, if you have any other questions about the history, let us know. So, fifth generation of producers. We started back in 1889, and we are now in a we are kind of a small mid-sized producer. All this idea of the concept of the taste at home with Oscar started about 2 months ago, I believe. This was in May. Tony Carter, the owner of Vintage Wine and Port, challenged me to do this. We get also a lot of input, fantastic input from Alex Bridgman, the gentleman, the huge port lover that runs the big 45 tasting that happens in London in April. Unfortunately, this year didn't take place because of the COVID. Hopefully next year. It's a great event for fortified wine lovers. And so, together with the help of Alex, with Tony, we had a first tasting of our ports in May. We tasted 6 different ports in 2 sessions, and some of you asked for a white port tasting. We decided that that should be summertime, so here we are today to taste 4 white ports, and then we also had a few extras, a couple of high-end ruby ports, a late bottle vintage, and also the just recently released vintage port 2018. So we'll start with the tasting. I will start maybe with a glass of water to help to clear my voice, and then I will go to the first bottle, which is going to be the Reserve White. You probably cannot see as such a small letters on the image, but I will leave the bottle here just in case you can. I don't know. I cannot. I don't know if it's readable or not. Melanie is telling me that it's not readable. No worries. Reserve White. This is the youngest of the white ports that we are going to taste today. So I'll get my water, get yours, and we'll start with the ports. So what now that's interesting about white ports is that about I would say a century ago, maybe a little bit less, one of the most preeminent merchants from the UK, Mr. Coburn, said that the first duty of port is to be red. So this showed a lot how the trade was looking into the white grapes. They were even forbidden to be planted, and it took several generations to start growing these white grapes again, and it happened in the generation of my great grandparents when we did that in the family. And because it was so hard to sell white grapes and white port, my ancestors were keeping aging the port in their cellars, and they would drink it because there would be no one interested in buying. So we have a comfortable, generous amount of white port, old white port aging in our cellar that you are all invited to visit and see whenever we are all allowed to travel again. But this one is not that old. We'll get there, but not yet. This was produced by my sister already. Was made by my sister. My sister has been in the company for 21 years. I have been in the company for 11. So she's double my time in the company and experience. Let's open our bottle of port. I picked for today. I picked a regular port wine glass. 2 months ago, we served our ports in regular wine glasses, bigger, wider. Those are very comfortable to get a lot of the flavors of our port. Typically, they are not what we use for port. I suggest to never use something smaller than this. This glass size is probably the minimum that you should use for your port to get more of the flavors and the aromas coming out. The ports that I'm going to serve today, the whites are chilled. They're at about 12 degrees. The temperature outside in the Douro is now 33 degrees at 8 p.m. I was out in the vineyards at 3 p.m. and the temperature was 38. So if we don't chill our port, this would be like a soup. Good. Are there any questions, Melanie? Not yet. Feel free to make those questions, please. So this is 8-year-old white. We can see that the color is already on the kind of a dark amber towards orange color. The aromas to me remind me of a bit citric, like orange peel, a bit floral as well, and we get this darker color because of the aging in oak. Oak is a key element to mature port. Red port can age for a long period of time in oak, and it will develop a brown brick color character that we call tawny. Tawny style. Tawny because of the owl that lives in the UK and has brownish, light brown, brick color feathers. And it's exactly that color that the port develops and matures in oak. And it happens the same to this white port that was like light gold color when it was produced about 8 years ago. And now it's already getting very dark for what a white is. This is a sign of oxidation. There was some oxidation that happens because of the aging in oak, the oxygen goes through the wood and slowly changes the color, the aromas, and the flavors. In terms of color, it gets dark. The same that happens to your apple when you cut the apple, leave it on the table for 10 minutes, and it starts getting brown. The same happens to port, but at a very slow rate. The rate here is extremely slow, and that's why we need a long period of many years of aging our port in barrel to get it to the right character. Port is always about 18 to 20%. It's always fortified. And a fortification is a process by which we stop the fermentation of the sugars that we have in the grape juice, and stopping them, they will no longer be transformed in alcohol by the yeast, but they will stay as fructose, as sweetness. It doesn't mean that all sugar of the grape juice stays as fructose. No, we transform half of them. So when the fermentation starts, the yeast is going to start processing sugars into alcohol, and as the time goes, we will have the sugar level going down slowly. Every minute, every second, every hour, it's going a little bit lower. And after 4 or 5 days of harvesting the grapes and crushing the juice, we get our port in conditions to be fortified with a brandy, with a wine spirit. And this fortification is going to stop the yeast of processing the sugars into alcohol, and that's when port is produced. The same procedure applies to Madeira, to Marsala, to sherry, which are together with port, the 4 famous fortified wines in the world. Last time, well, this is I find it's delicious. It's fresh with this citric taste, a bit of the floral notes. Almost reminds me when we are out in the woods in the Douro, and we get these Steva names that I don't know in English, but you get a floral, almost like dry weeds notes that I get in this Reserve White. What's cool about wine in general is that we don't all have to have the same opinion about wine. We don't all have to agree on the description of the wine. We don't have to agree on what's better and what's not so good. Each one of us grew up in different places, in different locations, tasting different food, going to different fresh food markets, going to holidays to different places. So we all build up our senses in different ways. And some of the flavors, some of the aromas give us a better, touch more our heart than others. And walking out in the vineyards in the Douro is always in my heart and in my memory. And I try to connect those flavors to the ports that I taste, because in the end, these vines were growing in this same nature. Well, Frederick Blair, Fred, who was the moderator 2 months ago, is a great wine enthusiast and port enthusiast, and we asked him to give us some food suggestions. So here are they. For the Reserve White, I suggest a simple dish to prepare, which is prosciutto, or as we would call in Portuguese, presunto, or jamón in Spanish, with melon. This is a super summer entree. It's easy to prepare, and I hope you get some of it for you, because it's a great food pairing. Melanie, do you have any questions?
Yes.
We do.
We have here, I think it's interesting for you to explain why was White Ports historically neglected as a food crop. Was Jesse White?
Jesse, that's a great question. So I'll tell you what happened back in 1756. That's the year that the Douro wine region is first demarcated, which means to regulate and to delimit. It was the first wine region in the world. At that time, in 1756, there were two wine regions that were already delimited, but not regulated. Tokai, beautiful, great wines in Hungary, and Chianti in Italy. And this was done by the King Jose or Joseph I. With the man in charge was the prime minister was Marquês de Pombal, Marquis de Pombal. And one of the things that was happening in the past was that there was some adulteration of the wines, of the ports. The region produces full-bodied, intense, dark color red ports. And neighbor to the Douro is a region which is known by the easy drinking, fizzy, super light wines, the Vinho Verde, which you may also know as green wine. Great wine for the terrace, for the stay outside and drink like 3 bottles in an hour. And the grapes were coming to the Douro, and in some of cases they were coming from outside of the region, and with not as good quality. So to preserve the quality of the port, it was important to make sure that the color, the concentration, the flavors were there when port was produced. And avoiding that white grapes were involved in winemaking was one of the decisions. So the king in 1756 forbade the use of the plantation of white varieties in the Douro, which means basically no white wine, no white port, and no white grapes being mixed into the red port. And this lasted over 200, 17, 18, 19, 150 years. People in the Douro never took too serious this decision. They thought that the white grapes would be good to soften the tannins of the reds and make port that would be more elegant and more soft at an early stage. So it would be common to mix a bit of the white grapes, maybe 1, 2, 3% in the fermentation tank that in the Douro we call lagar, which is an open tank where people foot tread the berries. And this way, with a bit of the white grapes, the red port will get more soft. It's only in the beginning of the last century that the white grapes are allowed to be planted. And since then, people have been introducing more white grapes, but not in huge percentages. In my family, because we have one of the vineyards at a higher altitude, my great-grandparents thought that would be a good location, fresher, with a deeper soil, to produce white grapes. And they would make white port, even if it was not very popular at the time. And so that explains why port consumption is still so much around red. It's about 80% red and only 20% white port. To give you the figures for white wine or for the wine in general, still wine, we get about 50% consumption of white wine, about 1% is rosé, and 49% is red. So we have 50-50 white-red, while port is 80 red, about 20% white. Hope I have answered your question, Jesse. Good. Are we ready for the second port? Well, let me just show you. This reserve white is presented to you on a 9 centiliter bottle. We also have it in this decanter. The decanter is a 75 centiliters, and it comes with a box outside. So this is a port that Vintage Wine and Port has in stock in case you want to purchase any of these ports. I'm going to show you all the 5 ports in general that we have are serving from this size that we have in regular sized bottles. Good. So next bottle. Find your 10-year-old white, please. I will do the same. So here's my glass. And here we have the 10-year-old white. I think you can read it. I think so, 10-year-old white. Cool. 10-year-old white. This is a special port for this tasted home with Oscar. Why is it special? Because we don't have this port on the market. My sister made this blend for you, so we could compare it to the 8 years old. It's something that in the future we want to bring it to our assortment, to have a portfolio of a 10 years old white. It's not yet there. Well, let me get the 8-year-old glass so we can compare colors. Maybe you don't have it, you have drunk it, but it's okay. No problem. So one of the first thing that you can see is that the 10 years old is a little bit cloudy. It's not totally clear. Why is that? Because it was not filtered. This is coming directly from the barrel, which is even more interesting. This would be a cask sample for you. Here I find a bit more of almonds and maybe hazelnut notes. Not as much the citric taste that we had in the orange peel taste that we had in the reserve white, but more of a little bit drier and more nutty. This is a great port with smoked salmon. Smoked salmon, it's also something very easy to get. There's no excuses not to try this food pairing. And I think we can even taste a little bit or smell the notes that the smoked notes are in this port. Where is the smoke notes? Where are the smoke notes coming from? When we make a barrel, we need to bend the staves, curve them. So here we have the barrel. The staves would be straight, as trees grow up straight out in nature. But to make the barrel, we need to bend them a little bit. And for this bending, we need to warm up the temperature of the oak to about 200 degrees, so the wood gets more flexible. There is a fire that is made inside of the barrel before we put the tops, the two tops. So imagine this barrel sitting up with a small fire being made inside to warm up the staves. And then the coopers can bend the staves and put these iron rings around the oak to hold. While warming up the wood, the inner part of the oak that is going to be later in contact with the port is a little bit toasted because of it's toasted from the temperature and the smoke. And it's common to use some smoke notes into port, especially when the oak is younger. And I think this is what we get here in this 10-year-old white. Do you agree with me or not? I hope some of you don't, by the way. One interesting thing about tasting, generic thing that applies also to wine. Make sure you distribute your port, your wine, your beverage around all your tongue and on your mouth. We have different tasting buds in different locations that get sweetness, acidity, bitterness, and a few other things distributed in different locations. If we swallow it straight away, we're going to lose part of the experience that port can deliver. And this complexity of flavors, it's better. We get it better if we have the port spread in our mouth or on our mouth, in our mouth. I don't know. And once we swallow it, try to inhalate a little bit to get to use your to use the aromas of the port to go to the back of your nose, where you have other senses to give you more information and more aromas. Um, it's common that we do something like this. So we are bringing the port and the flavors to the back of our mouth and get a retronasal aroma. Good. Is there any question, Melanie, to answer? Not yet. Am I doing that a good job that you don't even have questions, or are you just being lazy? You know what's interesting about this is that you talk for an hour to your laptop. You don't even know if people can hear you and see you. Okay, so the 10-year-old is not on the market, so I'm not going to show you any regular 75 centiliter bottle, but we are going to go to the next port, which is something very good. Very, very good. This is 30-year-old white port that is served once well, like the commercial size for it is a 50 cl bottle that I have right here in my hand. I'll leave the bottle here in case you want to see it. And I'll get another glass. Do the same, get some water, by the way. I don't know the temperature in the UK, but temperatures are high. We use a lot of water, so the best way to avoid hangovers is water. Keep hydrated. Your body really appreciates that. Good. Another glass. Of course, that you don't have to use the new glasses all the time. You can reuse the same glass and refill it with a new port. No need to run to your glass rack and get fresh glass anytime that you are serving it. 30-year-old white. This is getting a little bit darker in color. Little bit darker. This 30-year-old white. Yes. Cool. This is a port that it's a special port for me. It took me several months, if not more than a year, to convince my sister Claudia to bottle it. Even if we have a good amount of old white port in stock, she believes that these old white ports should not be sold. They should actually be enjoyed by us and by our friends and customers and colleagues and family, everyone in the cellar and by the glass. We should not bottle it, we should not sell it. And I told her, it's not really about the financial part of it. It's also about getting the possibility for people to taste something new and show them that our history in port does not start 20 years ago when we built the new winery, when our parents built the new winery. Actually, it was like 30 years ago, not 20. Build the new winery, and you have bigger volumes of 1990s port. We should also bottle sometimes one barrel or two of the older ports that we have. So after several months, Claudia accepted, and this is what we get of what we call a 30-year-old white, but which is actually, if I'm not wrong, a 38 or 40-year-old blend. So we have older ports than what we put on the label. How did we make this? So this is a work of blending a few different barrels in different percentages from barrels from different vintages, from different varieties as well, or we could have the same varieties within the same barrel but with different percentages, and try to create something balanced and consistent, and that makes sense to us and really please us when we taste it. And it's the same as trying to get the best of each barrel in the right percentages. So so we get the full the perfect combination for what a 30-year or 40-year-old white port should taste like. Color is a little bit darker, as I was saying. It's getting really towards like dark orange color, almost like a light brown. I can tell you that there are some, not necessarily ours, maybe ours as well, but not necessarily. But there are some 40-year-old ports, red ports, tawny ports from other producers that have a very similar color to this, which means basically that once port gets very old, it's hard to distinguish if it's a white or if it's a red by the color. It's much easier when we smell it and we put it on our palate. Well, it's much easier, but it's not super easy as well. So here we get a bit of more of the what I find is a bit more of a caramel notes, a bit more of a concentration of sugars, almost like brown sugar. Some nutty flavors as well. I think almonds are present again. A touch of spicy, almost like a nutmeg or cinnamon. And in the palate, it's long. It stays. It keeps going. Well, our suggestion to this one: dark chocolate will with grilled nuts and ginger. Dark chocolate is one of the most difficult foods to pair with anything. And port handles the bitterness of the cacao, of the dark chocolate, because it also has some tannins. Red port has much more tannins than white port, but this is a full-bodied white port, and with the bitterness of the cacao, and it's not a very sweet port. So with bitterness of the cacao, we get a great balance. The grilled nuts are going to cut a little bit this bitterness from the chocolate and pull towards more of the barrel matured, cask matured notes that develop in the white port. So this is our food suggestion: dark chocolate with grilled nuts and a touch of ginger, just to clean your palate. Good. Melanie, questions?
Martin is asking if you think that we should invest in vintage white ports.
That's an interesting question. Martin, the way the Douro region is still set up for white port is super backwards. It's we are not giving the right attention to white port in the production fields, in the vineyards, and the legislation is not supporting the growth of white grapes in the right place. So thinking about a white vintage port is something that was already in my mind. I'm not sure if it's going to be for you and my it's going to be done during our lives. Probably going to take several decades until this is fixed. What we do in our case is to select the best batches of white port and put them aside, and then will give us the possibility of producing something like this 30 or using the blend of this 30-year-old white, or produce something like the next white port that you're going to taste, a Colheita 1970. The fruit is not all the same. The location matters a lot in winemaking, and white white grapes also have a huge diversity of flavors. So it's not it, we can make great white port um, when we are fermenting it, like we do red port. So the possibility of putting this white port, young white port, in bottle, like we do for the red port, for the vintage port, it's something that I would really support, and I would love to make some experiments with that. We have never done, and well, I mean, legally we can do it. We just cannot call it vintage white port. But it's something that we do. We separate the white port, the best white port, and we put them in barrel instead of the bottle. But maybe it's an idea to share with Claudia, and who knows if not in 2 years we're not here tasting our uh, 2020 vintage white port, uh, like the pre-release tasting with a vintage wine and vintage port and wines directly with you in the UK. Who knows? It's another idea for another tasting in the future. Is there any other question, Melanie?
Matthew made another one. Which other port produces doing most of
Uh-huh. Other question. Well, I have two or three that I think are making great jobs. Not necessarily because they are super big, but more because they have been very consistent along the most of the time. One is a producer that still has the Quinta name on their trademark, which is Noval, Quinta do Noval. And Quinta do Noval has such a long history in port, has been through many difficulties, but it's a brand that is up there, really up there in terms of quality, very very consistent, and I really admire. I really admire the work that Mr. Ramos Pinto did about 100 years ago. Portuguese family that make a huge effort to promote port, making great ports, still nowadays beautiful ports and still wines as well. It's another company that I respect a lot with such a long history. Um, I think the Symingtons have been putting a lot of their passion and their heart into the Douro and the port production. They have been able to increase a lot their area of production, which for the merchants 100 years ago was really, really small. And they were just buying bulk from families like mine and many others in the Douro that we were the grape growers and the port producers. And some of the merchants have made the effort of planting a lot of vines to be able to make uh, port from the grapes that they grow and control the quality from the beginning. Not meaning that the quality of the bulk port that they were buying was not good, but just like do the vertical integration of the production. So I guess these two, three are people that inspires every day. Cool. So we are done with the 30-year-old white, and now we're gonna have our flagship port. Well, let me see how I'm gonna explain this. Let me put this apart before. You know when you have something very special that you think, why don't I share this with our customers, with our friends? Why don't we make something very special? A nice bottle with a nice box and bottle just one barrel of it, and people can travel 50 years in time, taste something that is older than some of us, or as old as some of us, and inspire us for our daily life. And that's what I try to do with our 1970 white port that we call Celebration. This is the oldest white port that we have ever bottled. We produced only one cask of it, And Tony at the vintage port and wine was, let me see how can I show this better like this. Oh, a lot of light. Well, yeah. So Tony, um, since the early moment that we start sharing our idea about bottling one cask of 1970 white port, he always told us that you want to support us, our idea. You want to buy some for his consumers, for his clients, and that's what we did about 2 months ago. And we always thought that we should put a small bottle of this 1970 in this white port taste at home with Oscar, so you could get an inspiration of what's in this bottle. So get it. We called it the very old white. You know, there's something very cool about the year of production. You won't see on this bottle 1970, only in the box. And why is that? I'll tell you. So when my great grandparents produced this port, actually it was my grandfather produced this port, João. He was just a grape grower and winemaker selling his port in bulk to the merchants. So he did not register this port with the Port Wine Institute of the time. So nowadays we are not allowed to use 1970 on the label. We just call it very old white port. So we don't want to frustrate your expectations because it's not going to show on the bottle the 1970. What I can assure you is that this is a beautiful port from the 1970, and I hope you already have it in your glass. You know, its color. This is interesting because when port gets this old, and this one is 50 years, it starts to show some green hints around around like the ring, uh, the external part of like I don't know how to explain this. Yeah, I mean the what do you call it? How do you say this? Um, on the outer part of the glass, we can see some green hints that start to develop in this port, and that's because of the very long aging in barrel. The older it gets, the uh, lighter brown, lighter uh, color it gets, and it gets closer to green. This is a bomb of flavor of aromas. It's very rich. So it's the nuttiness that it has. It's the toffee, the caramel notes, bit spicy as well. There's no food pairing suggestion to this one. Just meditate, and and that's probably the best you can do with this port. Has a lot of body and depth. Once you swallow, it stays and stays. I love it. I don't know about you. Really? That's good. That's good. That's good, ladies and gentlemen. Even better is to come to visit us. Maybe not now. Your government is not very supportive of the idea of traveling to Portugal. But in the future, things are going to change. We hope. And I really hope that you are able to come. And I know that some of you are coming. And I know it may take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but You'll be very welcome. Melanie, me, my sister, Fred, one of us is gonna take care of you when you come here. Well, this is the these were the 4 white ports that we have to share with you today. We have 2 red ports still. We have 15 minutes left, so don't leave your questions for the last 5 minutes because there's going to be few of them, and I won't have that much time. I promise that we'll finish this within 1 hour at 9. So start making those questions now. I'm going to put these bottles down, and Melanie has a question.
Yes, to finish White, Scarface 1981, it asks, do you think Quevedo can become the leader in quality of White Ports in Douro? It's set the aim. And another one about the whites.
Well, you are the right one to answer that question. It's not me. We don't when we wake up in the morning, we don't want to be the leaders of anything, honestly. I want to be my sister, me, with the family just wants to do the right things at the right time with the right do it properly with the vines, do it properly with the ports, with the barrels, do it properly with our colleagues and employees at the winery, do it right also with our customers, being them our distributor or just private customers, you, and I mean put all our soul and heart into what we do. And if we are going to lead anything, I mean it's not us that are going to say that. It's going to be you and our fellows that are on the other side, like you. And I leave that question to you. Is there any other question, Lee? Not yet?
That became like me.
Okay. What do we have here now? 2015 late bottle vintage. So red ports now. Switch glass now. If you haven't done it before, do it now. And maybe if there is anything of the celebration 1970, leave it for some more meditation once our life is over. And don't forget, it's gonna help you. I know. It's terrible to wash out now your mouth that you have still so many notes and flavors of the celebration white port. I know. I'm surprised that my daughter hasn't been knocking on the door yet. Little Halba. So, late bottle vintage 2015. So, 1 minute of your attention. It's interesting to describe quickly red ports. Red ports are made from red grapes only. The 5 most planted red grapes are pretty much by following this order: Touriga Franca, Tinta Roriz, also known as Tempranillo in Spain, Tinta Barroca, Touriga Nacional, number 4, and then there are a few others that are equally percentages, such as Tinta Amarela, Tinto Cão, Sousão. This would be like the top 7 grapes for red port. We harvest the grapes that in the old vineyards are blended in the fields. So you may have a vine of variety A next to a vine of variety B and followed by variety C, all blended there. During the last 20 years, 15 years, we have been planting more of blocks, a block of the variety A, a block of the variety B. Winemaker likes to control more the evolution, the ripeness of each single variety, while the old people, the experienced old people would prefer to make a big field blend. And this way, in case of one of the varieties that was not performing very well, you wouldn't even notice. It was like kind of buying an insurance. The distribution, the average production per hectare would be smoother if you have a big block of blended varieties. So we harvest these grapes, bring them to the winery. Take the stem of the bunch out crush the berries, and leave the skin in contact with the juice all the time. Once fermentation is at the right moment to fortify, we are going to add our wine spirit, and then we're going to leave the red port outside for the winter, the cold winter, to help to do a natural decantation. After that, we have to decide, do we want this port to be aged as a tawny port, which will get more of a nutty character, lighter and a bit lighter in volume with less tannins, or do we want to make it, we want to age it for a ruby style, which is going to have a dark red color, more tannins, more body. We have to decide that. If you want the tawnies, we have to put it in smaller casks like this. If we want to do the ruby, we're going to put it more time in stainless steel, and if it goes to barrel, it's going to be to bigger balseiros. This port here, this late bottle vintage 2015, matured for 24 months in a big oak bin. So it has a bit of the help of the oak to round the tannins, but we should not see in the flavor or in the aromas any oxidation resulting from the contact with oak. The bigger the bin is, the less exposure to oxygen it gets. Well, the color, you can see that it's like a dark cherry color. A paper always helps to contrast the color. In terms of aromas, what I find it's totally on the primary side. Primary means that aromas that come from the harvest, the vineyards, the vines, the grapes, which is some of the cherry notes, a bit of blackberries. Very fresh on the palate, medium body. It has still some tannish to polish, but it's very drinkable now. You can drink this now. You can age it for a decade. It will age well. It comes in this bottle. We are tasting today 2015. What Vintage Wine and Port has in stock is 2014, so the previous vintage. But in few months, it's going to get this new late bottle vintage, I guess. So it's a big change from the whites to the reds, especially because we were tasting old whites and now we are with young reds. This is a port that goes great, in my opinion, with a blue cheese or a Gruyere. It has some body, some structure. It's gonna help to dominate the intense notes that we get in the blue cheese. This style of port is probably the one most consumed in the United Kingdom. So you may feel more familiar to this style than to the white ports, I would guess. Melanie, any questions? And we're gonna go to the very last port of the night, 2018 vintage port. So vintage port is the style of port that has the longest aging potential. It's the one that if you want to give to your daughter or to your son, if you want to give to a friend that just got married or is just celebrating an anniversary, it's the one that is going to hold for many, many years. Why? Two key reasons. One, we get the best grapes to produce it. Second, we bottle it 2 years after the harvest. Less than 1% of the total production of port is vintage port. It's something really, really special. It's expensive, of course. I mean, best things that always get expensive. But it's something that once matured for some years in bottle, it's beautiful. The history of vintage port is very, very long. Historically, the port was shipped in cask, in barrel to England and bottled in England. And the English would have among the biggest stocks of vintage port in the world. It's still a pleasure to me to go when I go to London and I have the possibility of participating in a tasting organized by the Port Forum and taste old vintage port properly matured in at the right temperature and get to discover to know a bit more about my homeland, about the Douro Valley. So this is a 75 cl bottle of it. I guess you may be able to see it. We bottled this a couple of months ago, so this is the first time that I'm showing this port outside of our family business. So let's taste it together. Let's discover it together. The color is it's a dark purple red color. That's how I would see it. The nose is very fresh, very winey. It's still you can almost smell the freshly crushed berries. A bit of flower notes as well, like violets or a touch of orange flower. Well, for this one you need blue cheese, and you have great blue cheese in the UK. That's what you need. It's it's rich, it's intense, and it has already some roundness. You can see that. I mean, this needs time. You need to be patient with it, but has a lot of things going on, and that's the beauty of port. Because most of the time we don't get like plain simple flavors. You get a lot of diversity, a lot of things going on that make us think and go back to our memories for to place these flavors. What a contrast to the 30-year-old white, for instance, or even to the 8-year-old reserve white. That's the diversity that our land, our vineyards give to us. A lot of things change when you are located with your vines at river level, which is about 100 meters above sea level, or when you go to the top of the hill at 650 meters. It's then all that nuances that we get if it's facing north or facing south, if it has if it's planted on a terrace, which is like a kind of a stairs. If you look in if you look at the hill, or if you plant them continuous, every little detail changes, and that's what the French call terroir. and that's what we need to be very aware when you are getting the grapes into our winery to decide what's the best that I can get from these grapes and from this vineyard. And that's where I think Claudia makes a great job. Well, we are getting close to the end. Melanie is doing this. Tell me, Melanie.
If the sweetness of the ruby compared to the white ports to the sugar content in the grapes or something in the aging process?
Jesse, the sweetness is pretty much the same. Your perception of the sweetness is going to be influenced by the tannins that we have in the red ports and that we do not have in the white, or having a much lower level in the white grapes. Tannins are bitter. They would be similar to what cacao is. Cacao is very rich in tannins. And the more tannins we get in our wine, and this port, vintage port 2018, and the previous red port we tasted, late bottle vintage, in a little bit lower scale, but they have a lot of tannins, and they will compensate more the sweetness that we have in the back. White port, white grapes have much less tannins, and we'll get more of the exposure of the sugar, of the fructose. Also, with the aging in barrel, sugars, depending on the temperature in your cellar, but sugars tend to caramelize, and they get a bit more easy to recognize. And that happens when port, either red or white, matures in barrel. That's what. That's why it's normal to associate a bit of the caramel notes to older ports. Any other question, Melanie? Oh, Ben Reed. Hello, Ben. Good night. How are you doing?
He's asking how do you feel this LBB 2016 compares to 2003?
I find it it's a tricky question. You're mean. Well, we don't have the concentration in this 2015 that we had in 2003. The years were different. 2003 was extremely hot year, and we were putting all our best grapes into this 2003 LBV. For this 2015, we were going to grapes that had a lot of concentration, but we want to make it more approachable from the beginning. I can also tell you, I'm not positive about this, but I think the 2003 matured for a much shorter period of time in barrel, meaning that the tannins were a bit more tense and present when we bottle it. 2015, because of the 2 years in Balseiro, they get more soft and round and more approachable now. So I see this LBV as something more to drink in the next decade, rather than 2003 that is still showing great.
Mark is asking what is best next to the finish.
These things. So this is a measure for 5 liters. Once the liquid gets in here, it would come out. So you know that this level would be 5 liters. Why is this important? Fortification, to add the right amount of aguardiente, of wine spirit, when you are making the port. Also, when you do a racking of the port, so take the wine out of this barrel and move it to another barrel, or just basically oxidizing or exposing to some oxygen the port. Let me just get the laptop and show you what we have on the lower part. So do you see this valve here? You would like open the valve, get the port here, and use the funnel that is there to put it on the top. So basically, it's what we, and this would be 20 liters. And I think this is also 20 liters, but with the measure here in this tiny square. By the way, let's see what my father has in aging in here. So this is like the private collection of my father. This is 87. 87, can you read it? And this is 88. Good. Good, good, good. And in the holes back there, you have some more ports, and you have also some more in there, and you have some more barrels in there. And that's Melanie there. So you got to see the whole thing. Cool.
Thank you.
Wow, good to know that you are happy. I'm very happy as well. I think Melanie is also happy. We will do more of these in the future, I'm sure, because we are having a lot of fun. I think that you are also having fun. So if at some point in the future another suggestion for a taste at home with Oscar shows up on your inbox, don't delete it straight away. Just give a second thought. We'll bring you new things for you to taste. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the evening. And see you soon. We'll see each other soon. Bye bye.